C. Secondary backfill. Secondary backfill is defined as backfill from 1 foot, 1, above the top of the pipe to the top of the trench. Secondary backfill shall be constructed in accordance with details shown on the plans and these specifications. Secondary backfill shall generally consist of materials removed from the trench and shall be free of brush, debris, and junk. Rock or stones having a dimension larger than 6 inches at the largest dimension shall be sifted out and removed before the material is used in the secondary backfilling zone. Secondary backfill material shall be primarily composed of compactable soil materials. The secondary backfill material shall be placed in maximum 12-inch loose lifts or as directed by the design engineer and/or inspector. In special cases where excessive width and/or depth of the trench permit, and only with approval of the San Antonio River Authority representative, larger rocks may be incorporated into the backfill provided that the surrounding compactable soil may be properly and adequately compacted. Such oversized rocks shall be used only where the pipe has at least 5 feet, 5, of cover over the top of the pipe, and where the top of the rocks are at least 2 feet, 2, below the street or ground surface. These large stones may be placed in the secondary backfill provided they are well separated and arranged so that no interference with backfill settlement or the initial backfill zone will result. Secondary backfill material shall be composed of primarily compactable soil materials. Water jetting or water flooding will not be permitted as a method of compaction. Secondary backfill shall be compacted to the required density of 93%, 93%, using any size and type of equipment which will give the required compaction without damaging the pipe, bedding, or structures. The depth of layers, prior to compaction, shall depend upon the type of sprinkling and compacting equipment used to achieve the required density and the test results thereby obtained and shall be a maximum of 12 inches, 12. Prior to and in conjunction with the compaction operation, each layer shall be brought to the moisture content necessary to obtain the required density and shall be kept level to ensure uniform compaction over the entire layer. Establishment of the optimum moisture and density will be in accordance with TXDOT test method Tex 113A. Each layer of backfill must provide the density as required herein. Soils shall be sprinkled as required to provide not less than optimum moisture nor more than 4%, 4%, over optimum moisture content and compacted to the extent necessary to provide not less than 93%, 93%, of the maximum dry density as determined by tests on samples as outlined in TXDOT test method Tex 113A, unless otherwise shown on the plans. The in situ density of surrounding natural ground adjacent to trench walls will not be considered in establishment of control density. 93%, 93%, is the required minimum unless otherwise shown on the plans. Flooding with water will not be accepted as a compaction method and will not be permitted as associated with any backfilling operations. Density shall be tested in accordance with the requirements of ASTM D2922 non-swelling soils. Soils with plasticity index less than 25, shall be sprinkled as required to provide not less than optimum moisture and compacted to the extent necessary to provide not less than 93%, 93%, of the maximum dry density as determined by tests on samples as outlined in TXDOT test method Tex 113A. Unless otherwise shown on the plans. After each layer of backfill is complete, tests may be made by the engineer. If the material fails to meet the density indicated, the course shall be reworked as necessary to obtain the indicated compaction and the compaction method shall be altered on subsequent work to obtain the indicated density. At any time, the engineer may order proof rolling to test the uniformity of compaction of the backfill layers. All irregularities, depressions, weak or soft spots which develop shall be corrected immediately by the contractor. All work within the county street or state highway right-of-way must meet the indicated requirements in this section as a minimum and shall meet the requirements indicated in the plans or the permit issued by the county or state when their requirements are more stringent. Prior to the start of construction, The contractor will be responsible for contacting the appropriate TXDOT office or county commissioner's precinct office and for coordinating his activities with the operating procedures in effect for utility cut permits and pavement repair under their jurisdiction. Approval for all completed work in the state or county right-of-way must be obtained from the appropriate official prior to final acceptance. All work within the railroad right-of-way must meet the requirements in this section as a minimum and shall meet the requirements indicated in the plans or the permit issued by the railroad owner when their requirements are more stringent. Approval for all completed work in the railroad right-of-way must be obtained from the railroad owner prior to final acceptance. 3. Seepage retainers. To prevent piping and slash or seepage along the bedding and initial backfill zones, where porous material including subgrade filler is used for backfill, seepage retainers are required at an approximate spacing of 180 feet. Retainers are also required 20 feet upstream and downstream of each manhole installation, as applicable. Seepage retainers shall be 18 inches thick and extend the full height and width limit of bedding and initial backfill. Seepage retainers are similar to sand migration prevention collars, see section 404,2b, 2, and shall consist of Class D concrete encasement or firmly compacted, consolidated clay encasement. 4. Trench surface restoration. The surface of the backfilled trench shall be restored to match the previous existing conditions. This shall include final grading, placement of topsoil and seeding, placement of sod, such as at homes or businesses that had maintained lawns, or other unprepared and prepared surfaces. Trenches in alleys actively being used by vehicles, such as trash pickup, vehicle parking, etc., shall be restored by grading and compacting to 98% or higher with a minimum of 4 inches of flex base materials for the entire width of the alley. Alleys not actively used by vehicles shall be graded and compacted to 98% or higher, then spread grass seed for entire width of the alley. Trenches in paved streets shall be covered with a temporary all-weather surface to allow for vehicular traffic until the final asphalt/concrete paving is complete. This surface shall be a minimum of 4 inches compacted and rolled asphaltic black base, either hot mix or cold mix applied. It is the contractor's responsibility to maintain this surface until the final street restoration is complete. Temporary street striping may also be required. This surface must be removed prior to final asphalting. All street work shall be done in accordance with the latest City of San Antonio Public Works, or other city as applicable, requirements. Included in this requirement is replacement of any curbs or sidewalks damaged or removed during the construction. No separate payment for the surface restoration is permitted. The cost for this work must be included in the appropriate bid item. 406. Disposal of excavated materials. The excess excavated material, not utilized after all fill requirements have been met, shall become the property of the contractor and he shall dispose of it by hauling and wasting outside the limits of the right-of-way of the project and of public thoroughfares and water courses and in a manner meeting the approval of the owner's engineer. 407. Quality control. 1. The contractor shall procure, store, and place materials from either on-site or off-site sources which comply with the specified requirements. 2. Quality assurance testing. The owner shall have such tests and inspections as he may desire performed by a nationally accredited, independent testing laboratory for his guidance and control of the work. Payment for such tests shall be the responsibility of the contractor, including the material proctor tests and density tests. The contractor shall provide access to the test area, associated trench excavation safety protection, and backfilling of the test areas. The frequency and location of testing shall be determined solely by the owner. The owner may test any lift of fill at any time, location, or elevation. 3. Quality control testing. The contractor shall be responsible for compaction in accordance with the appropriate specification. Compaction tests will be done at one location point randomly selected or as indicated by the SEWER inspector/test administrator, per each 12-inch loose lift per 400 linear feet. Note: Tests requirements above are indicated as a minimum requirement, but may be subjected to follow more stringent requirements as established by other appropriate agencies, such as City of San Antonio Public Works Right-of-Way Management Plan, etc. Note: any failed test shall require the contractor to remove and replace that layer of backfill to 50 feet from either side from the failed test location. The contractor will also be required at no cost to SEWER to provide 2 additional tests at the replaced location where the initial test failed and at one location point, randomly selected or as indicated by the SEWER inspector/test administrator. Note: sanitary sewer laterals will be subject to compaction tests at the discretion of the SEWER inspector/test administrator within 400 linear foot segments. Any failed test shall require the contractor to remove and replace failed backfill. The contractor will also be required at no additional cost to SEWER to provide 1 test at the replaced location where the initial tests failed. Contractor shall be responsible for all costs associated with supplying material for the proctor and density tests. These tests shall be performed by a nationally accredited, independent testing laboratory. The contractor shall provide access to the results of the material proctor tests to the owner prior to performing any backfill operations. The contractor shall provide access to the test area, associated trench excavation safety protection, and backfilling of the test areas at the contractor's expense. The contractor will determine in-place density and moisture content by any one or combination of the following methods. ASTM D2922, density of soil and soil aggregate in place by nuclear methods, shallow depth, D1556, density and unit weight of soil in place by sand cone method, D2216, lab density of water content of soil and rock, D3017, water content of soil and rock, shallow depth in place by nuclear methods.